Hey everyone, Elizabeth here. The Last Laugh delivers stories that leave you speechless. If you're here for it, hit subscribe and let's go.
The wedding invitation arrived on expensive cream cardstock with gold embossed lettering. My sister Jessica's wedding to Marcus Wellington III. I should have been happy for her. Instead, I stared at the handwritten note paperclip to the formal invitation. Emma, intimate ceremony. Perhaps it's best you don't strain your budget. We understand if you can't make it. Mom. I read it 3 times. The message was clear. Don't come if you can't afford an appropriate gift. Don't embarrass us with your financial situation. My phone buzzed. A text from Mom. Your brother's wife is a financial analyst. She'll be there with colleagues from Morgan Stanley. Just thought you should know the crowd. Translation. Successful people will be attending. You won't fit in. I typed back. I'll be there. Mom's response came immediately. Are you sure? The dress code is formal evening wear. Another translation. Can you even afford a dress nice enough? I'll manage, I replied. What they didn't know, what they'd never bothered to ask, was that I'd been managing quite a lot for the past 7 years. In my family there were winners and there was me. Jessica, my older sister by 3 years, had always been the golden child. Graduated summa cum laude from Yale. Marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company by 28. Now marrying into the Wellington family, old money from Connecticut. My brother David married Melissa, a financial analyst at Morgan Stanley, as Mom loved to mention. They lived in a penthouse in Manhattan and drove matching Teslas. Then there was Emma. Me. The narrative about me had been established years ago. Emma tried. Emma worked hard. But Emma just didn't have what it takes to really succeed. I'd gone to state school, not an Ivy. After graduation, I'd taken a job as an administrative assistant at a commercial real estate firm. Entry level, as Dad described it to his golf buddies. She's finding her way. That was 8 years ago. According to my family, I was still finding my way. What they didn't know was that I'd found it. I'd started as an assistant to Marcus Chin, one of the partners at Chin and Associates Commercial Real Estate. He'd seen something in me. A hunger to learn, an eye for property value, an instinct for deals. Within 2 years I'd earned my real estate license and broker certification. Within 3, Marcus had made me his protege, teaching me everything about commercial property investment. Within 5 years I'd saved enough to make my first investment. A small apartment building in an emerging neighborhood. I renovated it, increased its value, and sold it for 3 times what I'd paid. I reinvested. And again. And again. By year 7, I owned a portfolio of 12 commercial and residential properties across 3 states, valued at $23.7 million. But I never told my family. Why? Because I'd learned early that showing them anything was inviting them to take it, control it, or diminish it. When I was 22 and earned my real estate license, I'd excitedly told Mom. Her response, "That's nice, honey. Your sister just made VP." When I closed my first deal and earned a $15,000 commission, I'd mentioned it to Dad. He'd said, "Just don't let it go to your head. One good sale doesn't make a career." So I stopped sharing. I built my empire in silence. I drove a modest Honda, lived in a nice but unassuming apartment, and let them believe I was struggling along in my entry-level position. The irony was rich. They thought I couldn't afford a wedding gift when I could have bought the entire venue. Actually, I had bought the entire venue. 4 years ago. Rosewood Manor was a historic estate property I'd acquired in 2020 for $4.2 million. It had been in foreclosure, neglected and crumbling, but I'd seen its potential immediately. The main house was a stunning example of Georgian architecture, sitting on 12 acres of manicured grounds with formal gardens, a conservatory, and a carriage house that had been converted into a luxury event space. I'd spent $800,000 on renovations, restoring it to its original grandeur while adding modern amenities. Within a year, it had become one of the most sought-after wedding and event venues in the region, generating $340,000 annually in rental income. My property manager, Thomas Caldwell, ran the day-to-day operations. The booking clients never met me. I preferred it that way. When Jessica announced she was getting married and described her dream venue to the family, I'd known immediately she was talking about Rosewood Manor. She'd shown everyone pictures from the website. "It's absolutely perfect," she'd gushed at family dinner. The gardens, the ballroom, everything. It's exactly what I've always imagined. What's the rental fee? Dad had asked. $47,000 for the full weekend package, Jessica had said. But Marcus's family is paying for the venue. They insist. I'd said nothing, just smiled and nodded. 2 weeks later, Thomas had called me. Miss Emma, we have a booking inquiry for next June. Jessica Anderson. She's listed you as an emergency contact, says you're her sister. Accept the booking, I'd told him. Standard contract, full payment due 30 days before the event. Understood. And, will you be attending this event? Yes, Thomas. I'll be there as a guest. Should I inform the family of your ownership? No. Let's see how this plays out. That had been 14 months ago. What I hadn't known when I approved Jessica's booking was that she'd been lying about who was paying for it. Marcus's family wasn't covering the venue. Jessica had told them my parents were paying for it as their gift to the couple. She told my parents that Marcus's family was paying for it. She told everyone what they wanted to hear, pocketed the money both families had given her for other wedding expenses, and simply never paid Rosewood Manor's $47,000 fee. Thomas had sent the standard 30-day notice. No payment. He'd sent follow-up emails. No response. He'd called. Jessica had answered once, promised the check was coming, then stopped taking his calls. 10 days before the wedding, Thomas had called me directly. Ms. Emma, the Anderson wedding payment is now 47 days overdue. Per our contract, I should be canceling the booking. But given your relationship to the client, what's the total owed? I'd asked. $47,000 for the venue package, plus a $5,000 late fee per our contract terms. $52,000 total. Don't cancel, I'd said. Let the wedding proceed. I'll handle the payment situation personally. Are you certain? This is highly irregular. I'm certain. But Thomas, I need you to do something for me during the reception. I'd explained exactly what I needed. Thomas had been silent for a long moment, then said, Miss Emma, it would be my absolute pleasure. The morning of Jessica's wedding, I'd received one final text from Mom. Emma, if you can't afford an appropriate gift, just give a card. No one will judge you. I'd responded, see you at the ceremony. I'd dressed carefully. A midnight blue gown from Nordstrom, elegant but not flashy. My jewelry was simple. Diamond studs, a delicate bracelet. I looked appropriate for a formal wedding. Nothing more, nothing less. I'd driven my Honda to Rosewood Manor, parking in the guest lot among the Mercedes and BMWs and one Bentley that undoubtedly belonged to the Wellington family. Walking up to my own property as a guest had felt surreal. The ceremony was beautiful. Jessica looked stunning in her Vera Wang gown, which I knew cost $12,000 because she'd complained about the expense to everyone who would listen. The gardens were in full bloom, exactly as I'd planned when I'd hired the landscape architect. I sat in the back row during the ceremony. Mom had looked back once, spotted me, and pursed her lips in what might have been disapproval at my arrival or my dress. Probably both. The ceremony ended. Guests moved to the reception in the grand ballroom. That's when things got interesting. The ballroom at Rosewood Manor was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the gardens, a marble dance floor. I'd personally selected every fixture during the renovation. I found my assigned seat at table 12, the one farthest from the head table, next to Jessica's college roommate's cousin and an elderly great-aunt who was already asleep. Perfect. I could watch everything unfold from the margins. Dinner was served. Speeches began. Marcus's father, Charles Wellington III, spoke about the union of two families. He mentioned the beautiful venue that Jessica's family so generously provided. Jessica smiled and nodded. My parents beamed. The Lies had built a house of cards and I was about to blow on it. During dessert, I caught Thomas's eye across the room. He nodded slightly. It was time. I pulled out my phone and sent a text. Now. Thomas disappeared through a side door. 60 seconds later, he returned with Richard Morrison, Rosewood Manor's head of security, and Alexis Chin, our legal counsel. They walked directly to the head table. The room was loud with conversation and laughter. Most people didn't notice the three figures approaching Jessica and Marcus. But I noticed. And I waited. Thomas leaned down and spoke quietly to Jessica. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw her face change, confusion then alarm. She shook her head, said something back. Thomas remained calm, gestured to Richard and Alexis. Marcus leaned over, asking what was happening. Jessica's face had gone from pale to flushed. My mother noticed. She stood up from her nearby seat and walked over. What's going on? Is there a problem? Thomas straightened. When he spoke, his voice carried across the sudden quiet that had fallen over the head table area. Mrs. Anderson, I'm Thomas Caldwell, property manager of Rosewood Manor. We have a significant issue regarding payment for this event. My mother's face showed pure confusion. Payment? The Wellingtons paid for the venue. This is their gift to the couple. Charles Wellington stood up. I beg your pardon? Jessica told us the Anderson family was covering the venue cost. The table went silent. Jessica's face had gone sheet white. There's been a misunderstanding. I can explain. The venue fee of $47,000 has not been paid, Thomas continued, his voice professional and clear. The booking contract is in Jessica Anderson's name. Despite multiple attempts to collect payment over the past 60 days, no funds have been received. The current amount owed, including late fees per the signed contract, is $52,000. My father stood up now, his face red. This is absurd. We gave Jessica $30,000 months ago specifically for wedding expenses. She told us the venue was covered by the Wellingtons. Charles Wellington's face had gone hard. We gave the couple $40,000 for wedding expenses. Jessica explicitly told us you were covering the venue as your contribution. The math was suddenly very clear to everyone. Jessica had collected $70,000 from both families, told each the other was paying for the $52,000 venue and pocketed the difference. Jessica was shaking her head frantically. No, you don't understand. I was going to pay. The money just got mixed up with other expenses. The dress, the flowers, You stole from both our families, Marcus said quietly, his voice cutting through her excuses. He'd gone very still, his lawyer's mind clearly working through the implications. I didn't steal. I was going to. You lied to my family, Marcus said. You lied to your family. You committed fraud. Ms. Anderson, Alexis Chin spoke for the first time, her voice calm and legal. We have your signed contract, your emails acknowledging the debt and documented evidence of avoidance. This constitutes breach of contract and potentially fraud. Rosewood Manor is prepared to file both civil and criminal complaints. The ballroom had gone completely silent now. 200 guests watching the head table drama. My mother was making small gasping sounds. My father looked like he might have a stroke. Jessica was crying. Please, there's been a mistake. I can pay right now. With what money? Charles Wellington's voice was ice. The money you stole from both families? The money you've clearly already spent on God knows what. Marcus stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. I need to speak with my attorneys. Excuse me. He walked away from his own wedding reception. Jessica reached for him. Marcus, please. He didn't turn back. My mother had started crying now. My father was yelling at Jessica, demanding to know where the money went. Charles Wellington was on his phone, likely calling his own lawyers. The guests were whispering, phones out, some already posting to social media, I was sure. And then Thomas did exactly what I'd asked him to do. He walked directly to table 12. To me. Thomas stopped beside my chair. Every eye in the ballroom followed him. Miss Chin, he said formally, using the professional name I used for my real estate holdings. I apologize for the disruption to your evening. Would you like me to handle this matter, or would you prefer to address it directly? The room went even quieter if that was possible. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress. My mother was staring at me with complete confusion. Emma? What? Why is he talking to you? I looked at Thomas. I'll handle it. Thank you, Thomas. I walked toward the head table. The crowd parted. Jessica was still crying, mascara running down her face. My parents looked baffled. The Wellingtons looked angry and confused. I stopped in front of the head table. Hello, Jessica, I said calmly. Congratulations on your wedding. Beautiful ceremony. Emma. Mom's voice was shrill. What is going on? Why did that man call you Miss Chin? Chin is my professional name for my real estate holdings, I said clearly, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. I use it to separate my business interests from my personal life. Real estate holdings? Dad repeated blankly. Yes. I own a portfolio of commercial and residential properties across 3 states, valued at approximately $23.7 million. I let that sink in for a moment. Including Rosewood Manor, which I purchased 4 years ago for $4.2 million and have since renovated into one of the premier event venues in the region. My mother's mouth was literally hanging open. You own this place? Jessica whispered. I do. I've owned it since 2020. When you booked it 14 months ago, my property manager informed me. I approved the booking under standard terms. Full payment 30 days before the event. But you drive a Honda, my father said stupidly. You live in that little apartment. You work as an assistant. I drive a 2019 Honda because it's reliable and fuel efficient. I live in a comfortable apartment because I don't need to prove anything with my residence. And I haven't been an assistant for 6 years. I'm a licensed broker and independent investor. I left Chin and Associates 3 years ago to manage my own portfolio full-time. I turned to Jessica. When you didn't pay the venue fee, Thomas informed me. I could have canceled your wedding. Instead, I decided to let it proceed. I wanted to see how far you'd go with the lies. Emma, Jessica started. I held up a hand. You told the Wellingtons that Mom and Dad were paying. You told Mom and Dad that the Wellingtons were paying. You collected $70,000 from both families and spent it on yourself while letting a $52,000 debt accumulate at my property. I was going to pay. Jessica sobbed. I just needed time. You've had 14 months. You ignored calls, emails, and certified letters. You committed fraud against both families and breached a legal contract with my business. Charles Wellington stepped forward. Miss Chin, we had no knowledge of this deception. The Wellington family is prepared to make full restitution immediately. That's not necessary, Mr. Wellington. This isn't your responsibility. Nevertheless, my family's name was used in this fraud. We insist on covering the debt. I appreciate that. However, the debt isn't the issue anymore. I looked at Jessica. The issue is that you've been exploiting family for years, and it's time everyone knew exactly how. I nodded to Alexis, who opened her briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. Over the past 6 years, I said, I've kept detailed records of my financial interactions with this family. I'd like to share some highlights. Alexis handed me the folder. I pulled out the first document. Jessica, do you remember 3 years ago when your car broke down and you needed $8,000 for repairs? Dad gave you $5,000. You told him you'd borrow the rest from a friend. Jessica's face went even paler. You borrowed it from me. You promised to pay me back in 6 months. You never did. I pulled out the signed promissory note. Jessica's signature was at the bottom. 2 years ago, you needed help with moving expenses when you got your new apartment. You told Mom and Dad you'd hired professional movers. You asked me for $2,000, said it was a loan. Another document. Another unpaid debt. Last year you wanted to attend that marketing conference in Paris. For professional development. You told the family the company was covering it. You asked me for $6,000 for the flight and hotel. You said your bonus would cover paying me back. 3 more documents. 3 more lies. That's $26,000 you've borrowed from me over the years. $26,000 you never repaid. And that's just me. I looked at my parents. Did you know Jessica also borrowed $15,000 from David and Melissa last year for emergency medical bills? Bills that didn't exist. My brother David had appeared beside the table, his wife beside him. How did you know about that? David asked. Because Melissa mentioned it to me at Christmas. She was worried about you, Jessica. Wanted to make sure you were okay. I looked at my sister. You weren't sick. You went to Turks and Caicos with Marcus. Marcus, who had returned to the table, stared at Jessica with dawning horror. You told me your parents paid for that trip. You said it was their anniversary gift to us. Jessica couldn't seem to form words. The total, I continued, is approximately $93,000 that Jessica has extracted from this family through lies over the past 4 years. Not counting the venue fee she fraudulently collected. The room was dead silent. Emma, my mother whispered, tears running down her face. Why didn't you tell us? Tell you what, Mom? That Jessica was taking advantage of me? Would you have believed me? Or would you have made excuses for her like you always do? Mom flinched. Every time I tried to tell you about my successes, you dismissed them. You compared me to Jessica and David and found me wanting. So I stopped trying to prove myself to you. I built my life quietly and I watched. I turned back to Jessica. And I documented everything. Every loan you didn't repay. Every lie you told. I knew eventually you'd go too far and I wanted to be ready. You set me up, Jessica breathed. No. I gave you rope and you hanged yourself with it. I approved your venue booking in good faith. You're the one who chose to lie and steal. Thomas stepped forward. Miss Chin, how would you like to proceed? We can file criminal charges for fraud, civil suits for breach of contract, or both. The entire Wellington family was watching me. My parents were crying. David looked stunned. Jessica was shaking. I let the moment stretch out. Here's what's going to happen, I said finally. The Wellington family is going to go home and seriously reconsider this marriage, as is their right. The full amount owed for the venue, $52,000, will be paid within 7 days, or criminal charges will be filed. Charles Wellington nodded curtly. We'll have a cashier's check to your office Monday morning. Thank you. As for the personal loans. I looked at Jessica. You have 90 days to repay the $26,000 you owe me with interest. 5% annually from the date of each loan. I'll send you the full accounting. I don't have that kind of money, Jessica whispered. Then get a loan. Sell your possessions. I don't care. You have 90 days or I file suit. I looked at David. She owes you and Melissa as well. I suggest you do the same. David nodded slowly, his jaw tight. I turned to my parents. As for you both, you spent 30 years telling me I wasn't good enough. That I didn't measure up. That I needed to be more like Jessica and David. My voice didn't shake. I'd practiced this. I built a $23.7 million portfolio by age 31. I did it without your help, without your approval, and without your knowledge, because I learned early that anything I shared with you would be diminished or taken. Mom was sobbing openly now. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need your acceptance. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I did it despite you, not because of you. I looked around the ballroom one final time. 200 guests staring at me in complete silence. Enjoy the rest of your reception, I said. The venue is paid through midnight. Thomas, please ensure the Anderson and Wellington families have everything they need. Of course, Miss Chin. I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking on the marble floor. Behind me, chaos erupted. Shouting, crying, accusations. I didn't look back. Jessica and Marcus's marriage lasted 6 weeks. The Wellington family demanded a post-nuptial agreement which revealed the full extent of Jessica's debts and lies. Marcus filed for annulment on grounds of fraud. Jessica paid back the venue fee with money from the Wellingtons, part of the divorce settlement. She's currently working 2 jobs trying to pay back the personal loans. She has 63 days left on my 90-day deadline. David and Melissa received full repayment plus interest after threatening legal action. My parents tried to reach out multiple times. Calls, emails, letters. I didn't respond for 2 months. Finally, I agreed to meet them for coffee. My mother cried through the entire meeting. She apologized for dismissing me, for comparing me to my siblings, for not seeing what I'd accomplished. My father was quieter. He asked about my business, actually listened to my answers, and admitted he'd been wrong to assume I was struggling. We failed you, he said finally. We saw what we wanted to see instead of who you actually were. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I haven't forgiven them yet. Maybe someday. For now, we meet once a month for coffee. We're trying. Jessica doesn't speak to me. She blames me for her divorce, her debts, her humiliation. She still doesn't understand that she did all of this to herself. As for me, I just closed on my 13th property, a boutique hotel in Charleston. I'm expanding into luxury hospitality. Rosewood Manor continues to thrive. We're booked solid for the next 18 months. And I still drive my Honda. Because I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I already know my worth.